Hey guys, tonight we're setting off on a journey across some of the world's most ancient roads, those that started with a simple need for trade. Except these weren't just any roads. We're talking about the Silk Roads, a web of paths stretching over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean, influencing everything from politics to religion and even your daily cup of tea. Can you imagine walking those paths as travelers did over 2,000 years ago? The wind carrying whispers of distant lands, the smell of spices hanging thick in the air. Yeah, you probably wouldn't last a day on the ancient Silk Roads, what with the bandits' rough terrain and the sheer distance. But we can dream right. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and leave your location and the local time in the comments. Let's see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The beginning of the Silk Road didn't happen overnight, and it certainly wasn't one grand idea thought up by a single person. It was the result of millennia of human need, creativity, and interaction. Initially, it started as simple trade routes between the ancient civilizations of China and their neighbors. The first pathways were more like rough trails used by nomadic tribes, yet they were crucial. The early routes of the Silk Road date back to the Zhou dynasty around 1000 BCE, but it wasn't until the Han dynasty in 2nd century BCE that the paths really began to come together into something recognizable as the Silk Road. These routes were not just for exchanging goods, but also for exchanging culture ideas and philosophies. When we think of the Silk Road today, our minds immediately jump to the luxurious silks and spices that traveled these paths, but the journey was far more complex. It was a massive intersection where East met West, and through it flowed ideas, religions, and innovations. But let's start with the basics. Who was in charge of these routes, and why did they matter so much? The Han dynasty, led by Emperor Wu, is often credited with opening up the West. But it's not like he just decided one day to build a road to the Romans. There were lots of factors at play, like military expansion and the demand for resources like horses and exotic goods. Historians still argue about how deliberate Emperor Wu's expansion was. Was he a visionary who saw the long-term impact, or was he just trying to secure more land for his empire's survival? Whatever the case, the Han dynasty's decision to send envoys to the West laid the groundwork for what would become the most famous trading route in history. Think about it: horses, silk, tea, spices, and jade. Each of these items sparked a chain of events that forever changed both Eastern and Western civilizations. But what is really fascinating is how these early exchanges between China and the West weren't just about trading physical items. They were about people, ideas, and innovations crossing paths in a way that would shape entire cultures. Imagine a Chinese artisan learning the secrets of glass making from the Romans, or a Buddhist monk traveling from India to China, spreading his faith and changing the religious landscape of Asia forever. This was the magic of the Silk Road, its ability to blend seemingly disparate elements from all over the world into something new. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of an oasis, the first sip of water after a long journey through the desert. Refreshing, isn't it? Well, for many travelers on the Silk Road, this was a daily reality. The path wasn't all rolling green hills or bustling cities. It also wound through arid deserts, snow-capped mountains, and rugged steppes. It's easy to forget just how harsh the landscape was. But here's the thing: those who survived these grueling conditions were not only trading goods, they were exchanging entire cultures. Yes, entire civilizations with their languages, religions, and scientific knowledge were mingling like never before. You probably wouldn't last long in these extreme climates either, but hey, you can still appreciate the beauty of these hidden desert cities and their monumental history. Before we get too deep, make sure you've liked the video if you're enjoying the journey so far. And if you've already subscribed, thanks for sticking with me. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, let's return to those traders. They weren't just out there trying to make a quick buck. They were part of something much bigger than themselves. The Silk Road was a collection of trade routes that connected civilizations spanning from China to the Mediterranean and sometimes even into Africa. While we tend to think of the Silk Road as one large, continuous road, the reality was more complicated. It was actually a series of trade routes, each offering its own challenges and rewards. And yet these paths were connected like veins of a body, allowing people and ideas to travel across the ancient world. For example, if you were a trader in the Central Asian city of Samarkand, you might not be getting your hands on Chinese silk directly. But you could purchase goods from another trader who had picked up these items further east and sold them to you. This is how trade worked on the Silk Road. It was all about interconnectedness, networks of merchants who would never meet, yet all contributed to the same grand trade. But it wasn't just about selling wares. Merchants, often living with their families in these oasis cities, became conduits for a cultural exchange that was far more impactful than just a nice piece of fabric or a fragrant spice. Historians still argue whether the most significant exchanges on the Silk Road were material or intellectual. Were silk tea and glass truly the most important items traded, or was it the exchange of art philosophy and religious ideas that had the lasting effect? Some scholars argue that it was Buddhism spreading west from India to China that had the greatest long-term impact on Asia. Others point to the Persian influence in the art and architecture of the region, particularly how Persian designs blended into the Greek and Roman traditions. And this isn't to mention the scientific knowledge that was shared. Greek philosophers were influential in many cultures, including in China, where the works of Aristotle and Pythagoras made their way through Persia. But here's where things get interesting. Imagine how many of those great thinkers never even realized their ideas would reach such distant places. One of the best-known examples of this intellectual exchange is the transmission of the ancient art of papermaking, which was invented in China around 100 BCE. Papermaking was a well-kept secret in China, but eventually it spread westward, reaching the Islamic world, and from there to Europe, where it forever changed the way humanity recorded knowledge. Without the Silk Road, paper may not have made its journey west, and who knows what history would look like today. This intermingling of cultures often had unexpected consequences too. For example, one of the less glamorous products of the Silk Road was germs. The route wasn't just a highway for merchants and ideas, it also facilitated the spread of diseases. But surprisingly, this wasn't all bad. The plague of Justinian, which devastated the Byzantine Empire in the 6th century, spread along the Silk Road. While that was disastrous at the time, the long-term result was an unexpected boon. In the aftermath of such catastrophic events, new opportunities for trade and cultural exchange arose, allowing even more ideas to flow. Historians still argue whether the spread of disease was a necessary evil for the global exchanges that came next. What if the world had continued without such pandemics? Would we have seen such rapid cultural integration, or would it have been a slower process with regions remaining more isolated? It's hard to say. But one thing is certain, the Silk Road wasn't just about trading beautiful things. It was about transforming the way human beings interacted with each other. And that transformation happened not only in the physical items traded, but in the very way cultures began to see and understand each other. It's late afternoon, and the wind stirs gently, sending dust spiraling through the streets of an ancient oasis city. Imagine the scene: a merchant's stall adorned with vibrant silks and colorful spices, each item a piece of a far-off world. But there's more than meets the eye. As you wander through this market, you may notice that it's not just goods being exchanged. Ideas, languages, and even customs are being traded. The Silk Road wasn't just a conduit for material goods. It was a bustling highway for the exchange of thoughts, beliefs, and even entire ways of life. You might want to rest your feet after walking the long distances, but the city pulses with energy, filled with conversations in dozens of languages. Take a moment now and make sure you've hit like if you're enjoying this journey. Don't forget to share where you're from. I'd love to hear how far this story travels. Now back to the bustling streets. Imagine being in a city like Kashgar, one of the key trading hubs along the route. It was a melting pot of cultures: Arab traders haggling over jewels with Chinese silk merchants, Buddhist monks exchanging scriptures with Zoroastrian priests, all under the watchful gaze of Turkic rulers. The Silk Road was more than just a trade route. It was a cradle for the blending of civilizations. And it wasn't just traders who were moving along these paths. Pilgrims, soldiers, scholars, and even entertainers were all part of the mix, each adding their own threads to the intricate tapestry of the Silk Road's legacy. Historians still debate whether these cultural exchanges were always harmonious. While many interactions led to the flourishing of knowledge, art, and architecture, others were far more tumultuous. In fact, the clash of civilizations was just as much a part of the Silk Road as the blending of cultures. Some areas along the route saw intense rivalries between empires where political and military conflict became as common as peaceful trade. Imagine being caught in one of these power struggles. The risk of violence was never far from traders' minds, and yet the movement of goods continued despite the dangers. How did the traders navigate these risks, you wonder? Well, it wasn't just about bravado. Many of these merchants carried more than just weapons. They had sophisticated networks of contacts that provided security and protection in exchange for a cut of their profits. Yet, despite the dangers, trade thrived, and along with it, the shared ideas of science, mathematics, and astronomy. Take the field of medicine, for example. While Greek and Roman medical knowledge made its way to India and China, it didn't arrive as a finished product. It evolved blending with local practices. Chinese herbal medicine, for instance, incorporated Greek remedies, while Greek physicians were introduced to the more holistic approaches of Eastern healers. Historians still argue whether this blending of medical knowledge actually led to more effective treatments, or if it was just a case of cultures borrowing from each other without fully understanding the original context. Regardless of the outcome, this exchange of knowledge became a cornerstone of the Silk Road's legacy, and it's hard not to imagine how the health of people across civilizations improved simply through the sharing of remedies and techniques. But not everything was a grand exchange of ideas or peaceful trade. The Silk Road was also a pathway for something far more intimate: food. Spices, grains, and fruits were all swapped across vast distances. In fact, without the Silk Road, many of the foods we take for granted today might never have made it to our tables. Think about the humble banana, which traveled from Southeast Asia to the Mediterranean through the hands of traders. Or the mighty black pepper, which was so valuable that it was once used as currency in some regions. For those early traders, food was as much a commodity as silk and spices, and their ability to transport these goods over great distances was a testament to human ingenuity. Speaking of human ingenuity, let's talk about one of the unsung heroes of the Silk Road, the camel. The true backbone of trade along the Silk Road, these animals were not just pack animals but cultural icons. Their resilience and ability to endure the harsh desert conditions made them invaluable to merchants who faced grueling stretches of desert with no end in sight. Historians still argue about whether the use of camels was truly revolutionary for Silk Road trade. Some suggest that the use of camels led to the expansion of the trade route, while others believe that the route's growth was inevitable even without them. Regardless of the debate, camels were undeniably vital to the success of trade along the route. As we move further along the Silk Road, it's easy to forget that the cultures who traded along these routes were not always as homogeneous as we might think. While trade may have connected them, there were deep cultural differences at play. And some goods like luxury silks remained the province of the elite, while others like pottery or glass were more accessible to the common folk. This unequal distribution of wealth and goods created a divide between the rich and the poor, and while it's easy to imagine a bustling, harmonious marketplace, the reality was often much more complicated. In some places, the wealthy elites used the trade routes to further solidify their power, while the less fortunate lived in the shadows of these grand exchanges. But let's not get too bogged down by the political aspects of the Silk Road. After all, this journey is about seeing the world through the eyes of those who lived it, whether they were wealthy or not. And for the traders, merchants, and even travelers who passed through the great cities of the Silk Road, it was a world filled with endless possibility. The movement of goods, ideas, and cultures across such vast distances was, in a sense, a glimpse into what our modern world would one day become: a globally interconnected space. You can imagine how this sense of connection, however fleeting, might have shaped the worldview of people living in these ancient times. The sun dips lower behind the distant mountains, casting an amber glow over the bustling caravanserai. The smells of roasted meats and fresh bread mingle with the earthy scent of leather saddlebags, while merchants and travelers prepare for the night. Here, along the Silk Road, the journey never truly ends. Every resting place is filled with the hum of conversation as people from all corners of the world swap stories and information. It's not just goods being exchanged anymore. its culture, language, and dreams. You're settled in for the night, sitting cross-legged by a flickering fire as a merchant tells you tales of far-off lands. What's striking is how diverse the crowd around the fire is. There are Persian traders, Chinese scholars, and Central Asian nomads, each with their own perspective of the world. This is the true legacy of the Silk Road. It wasn't just a highway for goods, but a bridge between vastly different cultures, each with its own beliefs, practices, and aspirations. Imagine the impact this would have had on a traveler of the time, a glimpse into a world that was so different, yet so connected. Historians still debate the extent to which the Silk Road helped shape the worldview of people in the ancient world. Was it the goods that truly made the biggest impact, or was it the exchange of stories, beliefs, and even religions that left the longest-lasting mark? One could argue that it was the Silk Road's role in spreading religions like Buddhism, Islam, and Zoroastrianism that had the deepest impact as these faiths traveled with merchants and pilgrims. For instance, Buddhist monks followed the Silk Road from India to China, spreading teachings that would eventually take root in East Asia and influence the course of Chinese history. But let's not overlook some of the less glamorous but equally significant exchanges that happened on the road. Think about language, for instance. The movement of people and goods along the Silk Road created an environment in which languages and dialects mingled and evolved. In fact, some scholars argue that the Silk Road served as a crucible for the development of certain languages. The Mongol Empire, for example, facilitated the spread of Turkic and Persian languages across vast regions, forever altering the linguistic landscape of Central Asia and beyond. And then there's the matter of art. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route for physical items, but also for the exchange of artistic traditions. You could imagine, for example, how a Chinese silk weaver would have been influenced by Persian designs, or how a Byzantine goldsmith might have borrowed techniques from Indian artisans. It's not hard to see how these interactions led to the emergence of entirely new art forms and styles, ones that blended motifs from various cultures into something uniquely Silk Road. Historians still argue about whether this artistic fusion led to a golden age of craftsmanship or whether it simply resulted in superficial borrowing, but there's no denying that the art created along the Silk Road left an indelible mark on history. Of course, not every interaction along the Silk Road was peaceful. The route's vast expanse also made it a prime target for bandits, and raiders and travelers had to be vigilant. Imagine setting off on a journey hoping to reach a distant city to sell your goods, but knowing that the path is fraught with danger. Yet despite the threats, the trade continued, supported by local guards, mercenaries, and even entire cities built with the express purpose of providing safe havens for merchants and travelers. These caravanserais, or roadside inns, were vital to the survival of the Silk Road, offering more than just a place to sleep. They were places of refuge where people from all walks of life could find safety, camaraderie, and occasionally a bit of much-needed gossip. But beyond the threats, the movement of goods and people along the Silk Road also led to the spread of knowledge in less obvious forms. Take, for example, the spread of agricultural techniques. As people traveled and settled along the Silk Road, they brought with them farming knowledge that helped improve food production across vast stretches of land. The Chinese introduced advanced rice farming techniques to Central Asia, while Persians brought the art of irrigation to the arid deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. These exchanges, though not as immediately glamorous as the trade in gold or silk, were just as transformative, helping to shape the agricultural practices of entire regions. And yet, for all its cultural and economic significance, the Silk Road was not without its limitations. As much as the route connected distant civilizations, it also reinforced the boundaries between them. For instance, the Great Wall of China, though often viewed as a symbol of isolation, also served to protect China from the Mongol invasions that threatened the stability of the Silk Road. Similarly, the rise of the Islamic caliphates and the Byzantine Empire in the West created competing power structures that could sometimes block the flow of goods and ideas. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road was ultimately a unifying force for these cultures or a reminder of their differences. Despite these challenges, the Silk Road endured, and its impact can still be seen today. The goods that once traveled along these ancient routes, silk, spices, gemstones, continue to inspire fascination and wonder. And while the physical route may no longer exist, in the same way the legacy of the Silk Road lives on not only in the goods and cultures it helped shape, but also in the enduring connections between East and West. As you sit by the fire, the conversations around you slowly fade, replaced by the soft whispers of the wind. The night has settled in, and the Silk Road, like the world itself, continues to move quietly, steadily, as it has for centuries. The people who passed along its paths may be long gone, but the echoes of their journeys remain woven into the fabric of history. And in the quiet of the caravanserai, you can almost hear the whispers of the past, carried on the winds of time. The morning light breaks softly through the dust of the desert, casting long shadows on the caravan as it sets out once again. The sound of hooves hitting the earth is steady and rhythmic, blending with the gentle rustle of silks and the occasional call of a merchant to a passing traveler. You can feel the heat beginning to rise from the sand as the sun climbs higher, but for now, the air is still cool and dry, carrying the scent of fresh bread from a nearby market. You're on the move again, but something feels different today. The landscape seems to stretch out endlessly before you, the horizon blending seamlessly into the sky. The Silk Road, as wide and varied as it is, feels like a lifeline to the farthest corners of the world. And today, you're not just a witness to the exchange of goods. You're part of it. As the caravan continues along the well-worn path, you're struck by the fact that every person around you is connected, even if they don't realize it. All their lives, those of the traders, the pilgrims, the nomads, are intertwined, bound by a single thread, stretching from China to the Mediterranean. One of the most surprising aspects of this grand trade network, as it sprawls across diverse landscapes, is its ability to adapt. The Silk Road was never a fixed uniform path. Instead, it was a collection of routes created out of necessity that wound through deserts, over mountains, and across vast steppes. Some sections were more traveled than others, while others were little more than dusty trails across desolate lands. What historians still debate, however, is how flexible the Silk Road truly was. Was it a constant, ever-evolving trade system, or were there periods where its importance waxed and waned only to be revived by new forces? As you move through the caravan, you catch snippets of conversation. A caravan leader talks about the struggles of crossing the Taklamakan Desert, and a merchant shares his thoughts on the route's occasional closure due to unrest. The Silk Road, it seems, was not immune to the same conflicts and challenges that plagued other trade networks. The Mongols, for example, were a constant force along the route, sometimes raiding and pillaging, sometimes offering protection to travelers under their empire. The ebb and flow of political power along the road were as much a part of its legacy as the trade itself. And despite the instability that sometimes plagued the route, there was an undeniable magnetism about it, one that drew people together and kept the trade flowing. And then, of course, there's the matter of the technology that made this all possible. The caravans you see moving along the path are often loaded with goods that were unimaginable just a few centuries earlier. Fine silks from China, spices from India, glassware from the Roman Empire. But behind these goods are the innovations that allowed them to travel across the vast distances of the Silk Road. The camel, often referred to as the ship of the desert, was one of the key innovations. Historians still argue whether the camel's adoption into long-distance trade was the single most important factor in the success of the Silk Road. Others point to innovations in cartography and the creation of more efficient road networks as key enablers of this grand exchange. But as with everything along the Silk Road, there's a flip side. While the route allowed the flow of goods, it also facilitated the spread of disease. The Black Death, which devastated Europe in the 14th century, is believed to have spread along these very paths, carried by rats and fleas, hitching rides on merchant caravans. The exchange of disease, much like the exchange of goods and ideas, was one of the unintended consequences of such an interconnected world. Still, this didn't stop the trade. It only shifted the balance of power, making some regions more vulnerable to the threat of the deadly disease, while others sought to protect themselves from its spread. As you travel further along the route, you encounter even more people. Sogdian merchants, Arabs and Tibetans, each with their own perspective on this vast trade network. It's clear that the Silk Road didn't just bring goods to distant corners of the world, but ideas too. The spread of Buddhism, for example, is one of the most fascinating stories along the Silk Road. Buddhist monks traveling with traders left India and ventured across the mountains into Central Asia, bringing their teachings to China, Korea, and Japan. The art and philosophy of Buddhism spread via the Silk Road would go on to shape entire cultures for centuries. And then there's the story of paper and invention from China that spread slowly westward, one caravan at a time. Historians still argue about whether paper made its way to the West through the Arabs or via direct trade with the Chinese, but the fact remains that paper revolutionized the way knowledge was shared across civilizations. Imagine what it would have been like as a merchant or scholar to finally hold a piece of paper in your hands after only ever using papyrus or parchment. The idea of writing down knowledge and storing it, rather than relying on oral transmission, would change the way societies interacted with information forever. But the Silk Road wasn't just about what it brought to the people along it, it also carried away ideas and innovations. The ancient world had no idea what was coming as these goods flowed in and out of their cities. For example, the introduction of new farming techniques and the cultivation of crops like cotton and sugar along the road significantly transformed local economies and lifestyles. In exchange, eastern regions would receive advances in architecture, military technology, and astronomy, leading to a renaissance in learning that spanned from the Middle East to China. As the day wears on, you catch sight of a distant oasis. The caravan is nearing a rest stop, and you can almost taste the cool water waiting for you. But in this moment, amid the hustle and bustle of travel, you realize something important. The true legacy of the Silk Road isn't just about the goods and cultures it exchanged. It's the connections it created, the way it bound the world together in ways that were both tangible and intangible, visible and invisible. The Silk Road didn't just trade spices and silks. It traded ideas, dreams, and hopes, weaving the world together in ways that would echo through history. As the caravan halts at the oasis, you are greeted by the unexpected sight of a bustling marketplace. The merchants here seem as though they've been waiting for you. Rows of vibrant fabrics stretch out before you, their colors popping in the golden light of the late afternoon sun. The sound of coins clinking, traders calling out in several languages, and the soft chatter of local travelers fill the air. There's something almost otherworldly about this stop, as though time itself has slowed down for the travelers. You've come to realize that the Silk Road isn't merely a collection of dusty roads or trade routes. It's an artery of cultures, each stop along the way serving as a pulsating node where various histories, customs, and ideas meet. Here at the oasis, the line between East and West blurs into something unrecognizable. The marketplace you see before you doesn't just sell silk or spices. It sells stories, relationships, and exchanges that go beyond the mere act of trading goods. This is where East meets West, not just in terms of commerce, but in terms of identity and belief. In the middle of this lively scene, you meet an elderly man who claims to have spent decades traveling the routes of the Silk Road. With wrinkles etched deeply into his skin, his eyes sparkle with the kind of knowledge that can only come from years of living on the road. He tells you about the cultural cross-pollination that took place at these very oases where Persian art mingled with Indian philosophies and Central Asian horsemen traded techniques with the Chinese. For generations, cultures that might never have met face-to-face were finding ways to interact, exchange, and share. There are stories of royal diplomats, merchants, and religious figures moving from city to city, spreading their wisdom, and in return picking up new ideas, practices, and beliefs. One of the most fascinating examples he tells you about is the spread of the Persian language. Persian merchants, diplomats, and scholars had an incredible influence on the regions they passed through. The language wasn't just a means of communication, it became a cultural bridge. Through trade and the spread of ideas, Persian culture and its language became the lingua franca in many places along the Silk Road. In fact, historians argue that without the influence of Persian, many of the key ideas and innovations from the East would have never made it to the West. Persian not only served as a trade language, but also played a major role in the translation of ancient Greek and Roman works into Arabic, which would later be translated into Latin and eventually spread across Europe. It's almost impossible to capture the true magnitude of this exchange, and the man chuckles knowingly as he points to a stall where a group of Sogdian merchants are negotiating a trade deal with a group of Arabs. The Sogdians, a people who flourished in Central Asia, were some of the most famous traders of the Silk Road. These merchants were multilingual and had the ability to bridge vast cultural divides. They understood how to talk to a Turkic nomad and a Han Chinese merchant, and that made them invaluable in the trade of goods, ideas, and even religion. The Sogdian language, once spoken by thousands, acted as the glue that held this multicultural web together. To many, the Sogdians were the true cosmopolitans of the ancient world. Your conversation with the elderly man turns to the development of written communication along the Silk Road, particularly the ways in which people kept records of transactions. The art of bookkeeping, he explains, was crucial to the smooth operation of trade. The creation of detailed ledgers helped ensure that trades were honored and taxes were paid. But of course, these records weren't always accurate. Some historians still argue about how reliable these early systems of documentation were, with some pointing out that much of the trade along the Silk Road relied on personal trust and word of mouth. Amid the bustling marketplace, you notice the items being traded. Brightly colored silks from China, intricate ceramics from Persia, and rare spices from India all find their place on the shelves. But there's something else, a particular item that catches your eye. It's a small jar filled with what looks like dried leaves, and the man tells you it's saffron, a luxury spice worth more than gold in some places. You can't help but be struck by the fact that this tiny, fragrant jar represents more than just a rare commodity. It's a symbol of the Silk Road's ability to connect regions across continents, to transport precious goods across the world, and to weave together lives in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few centuries ago. Saffron, much like many other luxury items traded along the Silk Road, had a profound cultural significance. It wasn't just used in food or medicine, it was also used as a symbol of wealth and power. The use of saffron by kings and emperors became so widespread that it was often regarded as the spice of royalty. In fact, saffron was so revered in ancient cultures that it was sometimes used as a form of currency, further underscoring its importance in both the economy and the social structure of various societies. As the sun begins to dip behind the horizon, the temperature cools, and you feel a sense of calm settle over you. The market begins to quiet, the goods are packed up, and the merchants retreat to their camps for the night. You find yourself pondering the world of the Silk Road, a network that brought together people from every corner of the earth, people who might have never known each other if not for this strange, winding route. The caravan prepares to continue its journey, and you know that tomorrow will bring new experiences and new exchanges. But for now, you've gained something invaluable, an understanding of just how interconnected the world was. Even in the ancient world, the Silk Road was not just about trading silks or spices. It was about people, ideas, and connections that would shape the course of history long after the last caravan had passed. The sun rises, painting the sky with a soft orange hue as you gather your belongings and prepare to leave the oasis. The air still holds a hint of coolness from the night, and as you walk towards the caravan, you can hear the chatter of the traders who are already up and ready to move. The next stretch of your journey promises to be long, but the oasis has given you a glimpse into the vast network of life that stretches across the Silk Road. Your thoughts turn to the idea that not all the goods traded along the Silk Road were tangible items. Some of the most valuable things exchanged were intangible knowledge, religious beliefs, and innovations that would go on to shape entire civilizations. You think back to the elderly man and his stories of Persian scholars, Sogdian traders, and Chinese monks, and how their travels along the Silk Road weren't just about moving physical objects, but about sharing new ways of thinking. Take the spread of Buddhism, for example. As the caravan moves forward, you can't help but think of the monks who had traveled along these very routes centuries ago, bringing their teachings from India to China, Central Asia, and beyond. The journey they embarked on wasn't just about spreading a religion, it was about changing how people viewed life, death, and the nature of existence. The Buddhist teachings were a product of the East, but they quickly spread to the West, influencing philosophers and religious thinkers for generations. Historians still argue over the exact timeline and the methods through which Buddhism spread. But one thing is certain, the Silk Road was a key factor in this transformative movement. As the caravan crosses a stretch of dry land, you reflect on how these travelers, those who followed the paths of ancient trade, were more than just merchants. They were missionaries of ideas, each one carrying seeds of new thought to foreign lands. The spread of religions wasn't always peaceful, however. Sometimes it sparked conflict. Take the arrival of Islam in Central Asia, for instance. As Muslim traders and scholars moved along the Silk Road, their ideas clashed with the local traditions, particularly in regions that had been strongholds of Zoroastrianism. Yet in many ways, these encounters helped shape the religious and philosophical landscape of the area, laying the groundwork for centuries of change. But it wasn't just religion that traveled along the Silk Road. You start to recall the stories of early science and innovation too. The knowledge of astronomy, medicine, and mathematics spread rapidly along the trade routes, often through exchanges between the learned men of the Islamic world and the scholars of China, India, and Persia. Ancient Greek ideas which had made their way to the Islamic world through the conquest of Alexander the Great would eventually be rediscovered and translated into Arabic. From there, they would pass into Latin and become the foundation for the European Renaissance. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route for spices and silks. It was a conduit for the ideas that would shape the future of science and philosophy in both the East and the West. In one of the next towns you stop in, you meet a merchant who is selling intricate astronomical instruments, precision-made models that to the untrained eye look like simple decorations. But as the merchant explains, these models were used by scholars to study the stars and planets. The use of such devices traveled along the Silk Road, carried from place to place by traders and scholars alike. The pursuit of knowledge, much like the goods themselves, didn't know any borders. You also realize that the interaction between cultures wasn't always an exchange of ideas and goods for the betterment of all. Sometimes it was about dominance, and one of the most obvious examples of this lies in the Mongol Empire. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his descendants, the Mongols forged a massive empire that stretched from the steppes of Mongolia to the edges of Europe. Their conquests played a significant role in the creation of the Silk Road as we know it. The Mongols weren't just conquerors, they were also the ones who stabilized the routes and allowed for a level of security and communication that had never been seen before. Their rule made it possible for merchants and travelers to cross vast distances without fear of bandits, and for the first time the Silk Road flourished on an unprecedented scale. The Mongols also brought with them a culture of innovation. You hear a story from another traveler about how the Mongols learned to make paper, something that was originally invented in China, and how they spread the knowledge of papermaking throughout their empire. Paper became one of the most important inventions in history, as it allowed for the mass distribution of knowledge and ideas. It's hard to imagine a world without it, and yet without the Silk Road and the Mongols' embrace of this invention, it might have taken centuries longer for paper to spread across the world. As you travel further, you begin to notice the geography changing. The dry, flat landscapes are giving way to more rugged terrain. The Silk Road isn't just one continuous path, it's a series of routes that cut across diverse landscapes, each offering a different challenge for the travelers who passed along them. The mountains, deserts, and steppes have their own stories to tell, each shaping the people who lived in these regions and the goods that were traded. You can't help but feel a sense of awe as you realize how vast this world really is. You are only one traveler in a long line of people who have walked these paths from ancient traders to monks, philosophers, and conquerors. Each person who passed this way left a mark shaping the flow of goods, ideas, and culture across the globe. The Silk Road was never just one road. It was a network that brought the world closer together, and it still echoes through the connections we see today. As you journey through the next valley, you begin to notice a subtle change in the atmosphere. The mountains rise sharply in the distance, their jagged peaks barely visible through the hazy morning fog. The caravan moves slowly, but there's a sense of excitement in the air, as if everyone knows they are approaching an ancient crossroads, a place where cultures and traders once collided and exchanged more than just goods. This, you realize, is one of the most crucial intersections on the entire Silk Road. It's a town known by many names throughout history, but today you know it as Samarkand. You can already see the remnants of its old glory, a mixture of intricate tilework, grand structures, and bustling streets. Samarkand was once the heart of the Silk Road, a meeting point for traders, scientists, artists, and philosophers. You marvel at the grand architecture that remains even as the town bustles with life. The city in its prime was a reflection of the cultural and intellectual melting pot that the Silk Road had become. Samarkand wasn't just a city. It was a symbol of what the Silk Road represented, a place where the East met the West, and where knowledge and culture were exchanged as readily as spices and silks. It was here that the legendary Timur or Tamerlane established his empire, bringing together Persian, Turkish, and Mongol influences. His empire spanned much of Central Asia, and Samarkand became the jewel of his domain. You can imagine the grandeur of it all, the sprawling palaces, the bustling markets, and the intellectual debates taking place under the shade of towering trees. Walking through the city's streets, you can almost hear the echoes of these discussions. Scholars from all corners of the world once gathered here, exchanging ideas on mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. You stop at a small bookstall where ancient manuscripts are still being sold to anyone who has the curiosity and means to pay for them. These manuscripts are written in Arabic, Persian, and even Greek, a reminder of the intellectual exchange that once thrived here. You pick up a weathered piece of parchment and glance over it, noting the neat, careful handwriting. Historians still debate whether this kind of knowledge sharing truly shaped the Renaissance, but what's clear is that Samarkand was a vital part of that process. But the Silk Road wasn't just about intellectual pursuits. It was also about the flow of luxury goods, silk spices, precious metals, and rare animals. As you walk through the marketplace, you come across a group of traders selling fine silks that are being imported all the way from China. The silks are woven with such fine detail that they seem to shimmer even in the fading light of the afternoon. You pause for a moment to admire them, thinking about how these fabrics would travel from one end of the world to the other. It's hard to grasp how such beautiful materials were exchanged between distant lands, and yet here they are spread out before you in the market of this ancient city. In addition to silks, other luxury items were in high demand along the Silk Road. Spices, for example, were some of the most coveted goods. You overhear a conversation between two merchants as they barter over the price of pepper, a spice that was once more valuable than gold. Peppercorns, cloves, and cinnamon were all highly prized commodities, and traders often went to great lengths to ensure that these goods reached their destinations. You think back to how these spices would travel from the coasts of India to the deserts of Arabia, and then onwards through the markets of Central Asia before eventually reaching Europe. The journey was perilous, but the rewards were immense. One of the most surprising things about the Silk Road's influence on the world is how much of it can still be seen in our daily lives. The global exchange that started on these ancient routes paved the way for the interconnected world we live in today. Without the Silk Road, it's unlikely that global trade would have reached the scale it has now. The impact of these exchanges is evident in everything from the foods we eat to the clothes we wear. When you stop to think about it, the idea of a connected world seems so natural to you now. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when the concept of faraway places and distant lands was a mystery. As you continue on your journey, you can't help but reflect on how far-reaching the Silk Road truly was. It didn't just affect the cities along its paths, it affected the entire world. You think back to those early traders who first set out on this route, braving dangerous terrain, unpredictable weather, and the constant threat of bandits. They had no idea that they were part of something far greater than themselves. The goods they traded, the ideas they shared, and the cultures they encountered would go on to shape the course of history. The caravan winds its way through the mountains now, and you're filled with a sense of awe. The people who traveled the Silk Road were more than just merchants. They were pioneers, adventurers, and builders of bridges between civilizations. You begin to feel a deeper appreciation for what they accomplished. The Silk Road wasn't just about the goods that were traded, it was about the connections that were made, the friendships that were forged, and the exchanges that took place along the way. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the valley, you realize that the journey you're on is more than just a physical one. It's a journey through time, a journey that takes you through the history of the world from the ancient past to the present day. The legacy of the Silk Road is all around you in the people you meet, the stories you hear, and the goods you see traded. You can only wonder how much more you will learn in the days to come as the path continues to unfold before you. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the stars now blanket the sky above you. The cold of the evening sets in as the caravan halts for the night. You and the other travelers gather around a small fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on the faces of those nearby. The night air is crisp and a light breeze rustles through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth. You feel a sense of peace, as if this moment is a quiet pause in the grand narrative of your journey. Around the fire, the conversation turns to stories. The traders, merchants, and wanderers who have joined you on this journey each have their tales to tell. Some speak of their hometowns, others share amusing anecdotes from their travels, while a few recount the dangers they've faced on the road. You listen quietly, grateful for the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie of strangers who have become companions. One of the older men, a merchant who deals in textiles, begins a story that catches your attention. He speaks of a man named Zhang Qian, a legendary figure in the history of the Silk Road. You've heard of him before. Zhang Qian was an imperial envoy sent by the Han Dynasty in China to establish trade relations with the lands to the west. His journey was fraught with hardship, and he spent many years traveling through Central Asia, Persia, and the lands of the nomadic tribes. Despite being captured by hostile forces at one point and spending time in captivity, Zhang Qian's determination never wavered. His story became one of perseverance, courage, and the relentless pursuit of trade and knowledge. The merchant pauses for a moment, his eyes twinkling in the firelight as he continues. Zhang Qian's journey was so long that in many ways it shaped the very idea of the Silk Road. It was his travels that opened up the western routes to China, and through his efforts, the empire gained access to horses, grapes, and other exotic goods that would have otherwise remained out of reach. You're struck by the importance of Zhang Qian's story. His journey was more than just an exploration of new lands. It was a quest to forge connections between civilizations, to share knowledge, and to bring distant peoples closer together. It's amazing to think that one man's efforts helped lay the foundation for the entire Silk Road network. You can almost feel the weight of his legacy as you sit by the fire, imagining his long and arduous travels. As the merchant's tale draws to a close, another traveler, a young woman with a sharp smile, chimes in. She tells a different kind of story, one that adds a touch of humor to the evening. She speaks of the ancient custom of silk making in China and the myth surrounding the discovery of the silkworm. The tale goes that the legendary Empress Lezu, wife of the Yellow Emperor, was sipping tea one afternoon when she noticed a silkworm cocoon fall into her cup. Intrigued, she began unraveling the threads which led to the discovery of silk making. Some historians argue that the story is more legend than fact, but one thing is certain: silk became one of the most sought-after commodities in the world. The idea of a royal figure sitting casually with a cup of tea, unknowingly discovering such a prized commodity, brings a smile to your face. It's a reminder that some of the most significant discoveries in history happen by chance through moments of curiosity and serendipity. Silk, the very fabric that has made its way across the world via the Silk Road, had humble beginnings in the hands of an empress, though historians still argue whether the tale is based on truth or myth. As you listen to the stories, you're reminded of how much the Silk Road was shaped by the people who traversed it. It wasn't just a trade route, it was a conduit for the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and inventions. While many of the goods traded along the Silk Road were material, the true value of the route lay in the knowledge and culture that were exchanged along the way. The merchants, travelers, and scholars who ventured along the route weren't just bringing goods from one place to another, they were sharing the wisdom of their respective civilizations. The fire crackles as you think about the incredible legacy of the Silk Road. You wonder about the countless stories that are still untold about the lives of the traders, the artisans, and the emperors whose decisions and actions shaped this ancient network. It's easy to think of the Silk Road in terms of goods like silk spices and precious metals, but it's the stories and ideas that truly bring its history to life. You realize that the Silk Road was as much about the journey of the mind as it was about the journey of the body. As the night grows colder, you feel yourself growing drowsy, the rhythmic crackling of the fire lulling you into a trance-like state. The sky above is now a canvas of stars, each one telling its own story. The distant mountains seem to loom over you, guarding the path ahead. You close your eyes for a moment, and in the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the whispers of ancient traders, travelers, and thinkers who once passed through this very spot. The next leg of your journey awaits. You know that there are many more stories to uncover, many more places to explore, and many more people to meet along the Silk Road. But for now, the comfort of the fire and the peacefulness of the night take over. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and discoveries, but tonight you are content in the quiet stillness of the world around you. The next morning, the first light of dawn breaks through the trees, casting a golden glow over the camp. The sounds of nature awaken around you, birds calling to each other, the rustle of leaves, and the low hum of conversation as your fellow travelers begin to stir. The warmth of the fire has faded, but the chill of the early morning air is refreshing. You stretch your arms and pack away your belongings, ready to continue your journey. As you walk along the path with the caravan, the landscape gradually shifts. The rolling hills of the previous day give way to vast open plains, stretching as far as the eye can see. In the distance, you spot the faint outline of mountains, their snow-capped peaks glistening in the early light. The caravan moves steadily forward, the rhythmic sound of hooves and wheels accompanying your thoughts. The merchant who told you the story of Zhang Qian earlier is walking beside you now. He seems deep in thought, his gaze fixed on the horizon. You strike up a conversation, asking him about his own experiences on the Silk Road. He smiles and begins to recount his travels, telling you about the diverse cultures he has encountered along the way. One story stands out. He describes the bustling markets of Samarkand, a city that became one of the most important centers of trade along the Silk Road. Samarkand was known for its grand architecture, the vibrant colors of its carpets and fabrics, and its role as a crossroads for traders from all over the world. The merchant recalls the sheer diversity of goods and people that filled the market's Persian spices, Indian textiles, Chinese porcelain, and Roman glassware. It was a place where East met West, he says, a true melting pot. You can't help but imagine the scene. The air is thick with the scent of spices and perfumes, the chatter of merchants haggling in various languages, and the clinking of coins as deals are made. The sounds and smells of Samarkand come alive in your mind, and you can almost hear the rustle of silks as they are traded from one hand to the next. It must have been a place of incredible energy where the flow of goods was matched only by the flow of ideas and cultures. The merchant continues explaining how Samarkand became a symbol of the Silk Road's cultural exchange. It wasn't just about trading goods, it was about the people who brought their knowledge, beliefs, and customs with them. The city was a hub of learning with scholars from different parts of the world gathering to share their wisdom. The art of astronomy, mathematics, and medicine flourished here, with the work of scholars like Al-Khwarizmi and Avicenna influencing the course of history. As the caravan moves forward, the merchant shifts the conversation to the dangers that lurked along the Silk Road. For all its riches and cultural exchange, the route was also fraught with peril. Nomadic tribes such as the Xiongnu and the Huns roamed the steppes, often raiding caravans for their goods. Bandits were another constant threat, hiding in the deserts and mountains, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The journey was not for the faint of heart. You see, the merchant says, his tone turning serious. The Silk Road was as much about survival as it was about trade. Every caravan had its guards, and every traveler had to be prepared for danger. You couldn't afford to let your guard down, not for a second. His words make you think about the true nature of the Silk Road. It wasn't just a smooth path of trade and diplomacy. It was a route carved out by the sweat blood and determination of countless people. The traders, soldiers, and travelers who braved its dangers did so not only to acquire wealth, but to forge connections that would span centuries. And through it all, they carried with them the knowledge of the world, sharing it with those they encountered. As the day progresses, the landscape continues to change. The once green plains give way to a more barren terrain. The trees thin out, and the road becomes rougher with jagged rocks and loose gravel, making each step more difficult. Yet the caravan moves forward, driven by the promise of the next market, the next encounter, and the next discovery. The journey feels timeless in a way, as though you are walking in the footsteps of those who came before you. You can almost imagine the caravan routes of the past, the clattering of carts, and the rustling of camels' hooves against the earth. The people who traveled these same roads hundreds, even thousands of years ago would have felt much the same way you do now, curious, determined, and slightly apprehensive, but with an unwavering desire to reach their destination. The merchant offers you a small pouch of dried fruit, a gesture of goodwill, and you accept it gratefully. It's a simple thing, But in this moment, it feels like a connection, a shared experience that transcends time and space. You're part of something bigger now, a part of the vast network of travelers who have passed through this same landscape for centuries. As you continue on your way, you can't help but reflect on the journey you've undertaken. The Silk Road was never just a series of roads or trade routes. It was a living, breathing network that brought the world closer together. You're not just a traveler passing through. You're a part of that history, a tiny cog in the great wheel that turned for so many centuries. And perhaps in some way, you're also carrying the legacy of the Silk Road with you as you continue your own journey. As the days continue to blend into one long journey, you begin to settle into the rhythm of life on the Silk Road. The landscape, ever-changing, seems to mirror the ebb and flow of the caravan. Some days are calm, the path clear and open, while other days bring unexpected challenges, dust storms that cut visibility to mere feet, treacherous mountain passes, and encounters with hostile locals. Through it all, you begin to understand why the merchants and travelers of old spoke of the road as both a lifeline and a perilous undertaking. One evening, as the caravan sets up camp under a starry sky, you sit by the fire and listen to the sounds of distant drums. The merchant beside you explains that the drums signal the presence of a local tribe, one of many that once thrived along the Silk Road. These tribes played a crucial role in the network of trade, not only as intermediaries, but also as protectors of certain sections of the route. They knew the land better than anyone, guiding caravans through the roughest terrain and offering protection from the many dangers of the journey. The mention of these tribes sparks a conversation among the travelers around the fire. A few are familiar with the nomadic Xiongnu, a fierce group of warriors who once dominated the northern stretches of the Silk Road, while others speak of the Sogdians, a people whose merchants were instrumental in the exchange of goods and culture between East and West. The Sogdians in particular were known for their ability to navigate the complex social and political landscapes of the regions they passed through, forging alliances with the powerful empires of the time from China to Persia. It's easy to imagine the bustling life of the Silk Road during its heyday, where each tribe, each caravan, and each market had a role to play in the grand dance of trade. The Xiongnu, for example, would often protect caravans traveling through the dangerous steppes, while the Sogdians would serve as mediators between different cultures, translating not just languages, but customs and traditions. The Silk Road was more than a mere trade route. It was a vast web of connections, each thread tied to the next by necessity, curiosity, or the simple desire for survival. Yet, despite the vast network of alliances and protections, the dangers remained. The deserts of Central Asia were particularly notorious with extreme heat during the day and freezing cold at night. The winds would whip up the sand, obscuring everything in their path, making navigation nearly impossible. Bandits were another constant threat, lying in wait for unsuspecting travelers to fall into their trap. In some areas, even the terrain itself was a hazard, mountain passes so narrow and steep that only the most skilled of travelers could navigate them without fear of falling. It's hard not to feel a sense of awe as you sit by the fire, listening to the stories of those who have lived through these dangers. The travelers around you share their own experiences of peril, narrowly escaping bandit attacks, surviving storms, and braving treacherous mountains. Yet despite the hardships, there's a shared sense of pride in being a part of this great journey. You've come to realize that the Silk Road was as much about resilience as it was about wealth. As the night wears on, the drums grow louder, and the shadows of the campfire stretch long across the ground. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat and spices, a comforting reminder of the rich flavors that the Silk Road helped bring into the world. You can taste the blend of cultures in every meal: Persian herbs, Indian spices, Chinese rice, and Mediterranean olives, all brought together through the magic of trade. Your mind drifts to the cities you've heard so much about, the legendary ones that rose along the route, places like Chang'an, Bukhara, and Constantinople. These cities were not just hubs of trade, they were vibrant centers of culture and learning, where scholars, artists, and philosophers from across the world came together to exchange ideas. It was in these cities that the great exchange of knowledge took place, where mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy were shared across borders. In the stillness of the night, you can almost hear the bustling streets of Chang'an, the capital of the Han Dynasty, where merchants peddled their wares and scholars debated the works of Confucius and Laozi. You can imagine the intellectual fervor of Bukhara, a city that became a center of Islamic learning, where scholars studied the stars and translated ancient Greek texts into Arabic. You picture the vibrant markets of Constantinople, where silk from China mingled with spices from India and glassware from Rome, creating a truly cosmopolitan atmosphere. The night air is crisp now, and the fire has burned down to glowing embers. As you curl up in your blanket, the caravan settling down for the night, you think about the people who traveled these same routes long before you. Merchants, scholars, and warriors, all connected by the same desire for discovery, knowledge, and survival. The Silk Road was more than just a trade route. It was the lifeblood of the ancient world, a thread that wove the diverse cultures of Asia, Europe, and Africa into a single interconnected tapestry. Tomorrow, you will continue your journey, heading further into the unknown, driven by the same spirit that carried those who came before you. The road stretches on, and with each step, you feel more deeply connected to the history of the Silk Road and to the people whose stories are still unfolding today. As the days pass, you find yourself growing more accustomed to the rhythms of life on the Silk Road. The heat of the desert sun has become a familiar companion, and you've learned to protect yourself from the harsh winds that sweep across the plains. The caravans move like clockwork now, each member knowing their role, from the traders to the guides, the cooks to the caravan leaders. The days are long, and the nights are filled with the sounds of the desert, howling winds, the rustle of tent fabric, and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. One day, the caravan takes a rare rest stopping in an oasis that has been frequented by travelers for centuries. The water here is cool and clear, a refreshing change from the arid expanse that stretches for miles in every direction. The oasis is more than just a place to quench thirst. It's a meeting point for traders and travelers from all over the world. As you sit by the water, you watch as a group of merchants unpack their goods, setting up small stalls along the edge of the oasis. The air is thick with the scents of spices, oils, and incense, a sensory reminder of the trade that sustains the Silk Road. It's easy to forget in this tranquil moment the dangers that lie just beyond the oasis. The world outside is harsh and unforgiving, but within this small pocket of life, there is a fleeting sense of peace. You hear stories of the many traders who have passed through this very oasis, some of them long gone, their names lost to history. Yet there is a sense of continuity of generations of travelers who have shared this same experience, drawing strength from the shared knowledge that this small patch of land can offer them respite before they continue their journey. The caravans here aren't just transporting goods. They are also carrying stories, memories, and ideas across the world. It's in these moments of pause that you begin to understand the true value of the Silk Road, not just the wealth it generates, but the knowledge it facilitates. As the evening approaches, the sky shifts to a deep shade of purple, and the stars begin to emerge in the heavens. The traders gather around a large fire, telling tales of distant lands and the strange customs of the people they've met along the way. One merchant, an elderly man with a long white beard, recounts his travels to the far reaches of the Persian Empire. His voice is slow and deliberate, as if each word carries the weight of years spent on the road. He speaks of the great city of Persepolis, once the heart of the Persian Empire, and how its grand palaces and temples were a testament to the empire's power and wealth. Yet he also speaks of the fragility of empires, how they rise and fall with the tides of history. The merchants listening around the fire nod in understanding, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. As you listen, you find yourself drawn to the stories of distant lands. The Silk Road has always been a bridge between East and West, a place where cultures meet and merge. From the bustling cities of China to the sophisticated courts of the Persian Empire, the road is a living testament to the interconnectedness of the ancient world. In the merchants' tales, you hear echoes of the great civilizations that flourished along the route, their legacies carried by those who continue to walk the road today. The conversation shifts to a more personal note as the merchant begins to speak of the challenges of the journey. He mentions the countless dangers of the desert, the bandits who lie in wait, and the treacherous mountain passes that have claimed the lives of many travelers. There is a certain reverence in his voice as he speaks of those who didn't make it their names forever, lost to the winds of time. Yet despite the risks, the merchant speaks of the thrill of the journey, of the camaraderie that forms among those who travel together. There's a bond, he says, forged in the crucible of the Silk Road, a bond that transcends borders and cultures. As the fire crackles and the night grows colder, you find yourself reflecting on your own journey. The road, though long and arduous, has become a part of you. The faces of the people you've met along the way, the stories they've shared, and the lessons learned have woven themselves into your own narrative. It's no longer just about the destination, but about the journey itself. The moments of connection, the shared experiences, and the realization that you are part of something far greater than yourself. The caravan will move on in the morning, heading deeper into the unknown. But for now, you allow yourself to rest, listening to the sounds of the night and the stories that will continue to unfold with every step taken on this ancient road. The Silk Road is more than just a trade route. It's a living history, one that continues to evolve with each traveler who walks its path. As the fire dies down and the last embers fade, you slip into a peaceful sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new stories, and new connections. The Silk Road has a way of drawing you in, of making you feel as if you're part of its eternal flow, its endless journey. The next morning, you wake to the sound of the caravan stirring. The cool morning air feels refreshing against your skin, the desert's vast silence broken only by the murmurs of the traders preparing for another long day of travel. The oasis, once a place of respite, is now behind you, fading into the horizon as the caravan sets out once more. You feel the rhythm of the journey in your bones, the slow, steady pace that carries you from one stop to the next. The road stretches ahead, uncertain and yet oddly familiar, as though it has always been there, waiting for travelers like you to walk its length. As the caravan moves on, the landscape begins to change. The endless expanse of desert gives way to rocky terrain, jagged hills rising in the distance. You begin to understand the vastness of the land, the way the Silk Road traverses such diverse environments, from arid deserts to lush oases, from snow-capped mountains to fertile river valleys. The road is a journey through time and geography, a path that connects cultures and lands that on the surface may seem completely different. Yet as you travel, you see the ways in which they are all linked, bound together by this ancient trade route. The guides, with their keen sense of direction and knowledge of the terrain, lead the caravan through the rocky passes with practiced ease. You marvel at their ability to navigate the rugged landscape, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger, any indication of where the road might lead. They are the unsung heroes of the journey, their skill and experience keeping the caravan on course. Without them, the Silk Road would be far more treacherous a route that might claim the lives of those who are unprepared. The midday sun begins to rise higher in the sky, and the heat grows more intense. You've learned to conserve your energy during the day, finding moments of shade whenever possible, sipping from your water skin in small, careful gulps. As you look around, you notice that many of the traders have taken to wearing wide-brimmed hats and long cloaks to protect themselves from the sun. The harsh conditions of the journey are felt by all, but it's the traders' resilience that keeps the caravan moving forward. The mood in the caravan shifts with the terrain. The desert was an almost meditative space, its vastness bringing a quiet sense of contemplation. But now, as the landscape changes, so too does the atmosphere. There's a certain tension in the air, a subtle undercurrent of anticipation as the travelers draw closer to the next destination. The guides speak of a bustling market town, nestled between the mountains, a place where traders from across the world converge to barter and exchange goods. You've heard whispers of this town, its streets filled with colorful fabrics, exotic spices, and trinkets from distant lands. As you approach the town, the signs of life become more apparent. The dust of the road gives way to the smell of roasting meat, the sounds of hammers and anvils, and the clatter of wooden carts. The town is a hub of activity, a crossroads where the flow of goods and ideas from east to west converges. It's here in these bustling markets that you begin to understand the true significance of the Silk Road, not just as a trade route, but as a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and innovations. The items you see for sale are not merely commodities. They are the physical manifestations of centuries of cultural exchange. You walk through the market, your senses overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of sights, sounds, and smells. There are merchants from India selling intricately woven textiles, their vibrant colors almost blinding in the midday sun. A stall nearby is filled with Persian ceramics, their delicate designs telling stories of ancient dynasties in faraway lands. You stop by a booth laden with fragrant spices, their scents both exotic and intoxicating. Each merchant has a story to tell, each item for sale, a piece of the grand narrative that stretches from China to the Mediterranean. As you browse, you overhear snippets of conversation in a dozen different languages: Persian, Arabic, Greek, and even the languages of the Far East. It's a reminder of the diversity of the Silk Road, where traders and travelers from all corners of the world meet and mingle, exchanging not only goods, but also knowledge and ideas. The conversations you hear are as much a part of the journey as the physical goods being traded. Historians still argue whether the flow of ideas along the Silk Road was as significant as the flow of goods, but you can't help but feel that the two are inseparable. The market town is alive with the energy of the Silk Road, but there's also a quiet sense of danger that lingers in the background. Bandits are known to target caravans as they approach these bustling hubs, hoping to catch travelers off guard. The guides are always on high alert, their eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. You can't help but wonder what it would be like to be a part of one of these raids, to be a bandit on the lookout for a slow-moving caravan ready to strike. But those thoughts fade quickly as the excitement of the market pulls you in once more. The day begins to wind down, and you find yourself sitting at a small stall enjoying a simple meal of flatbread and dried fruit. The sun is beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the market. It's easy to lose yourself in this moment, to forget about the challenges that lie ahead. For now, you are a part of something larger, something ancient and enduring. The Silk Road may be a route of trade, but it's also a path of connection, of shared experiences, of cultures meeting and blending in the most unexpected ways. As the caravan prepares to leave the town and continue its journey, you feel a sense of gratitude for this brief interlude. The road ahead may be uncertain, but the experiences you've had so far have been enriching, filled with moments of discovery, connection, and wonder. The Silk Road is a journey that never truly ends. Even when the caravan moves on, the stories of the people and places you've encountered will remain with you, carried forward by the very road that has brought you here. The caravan sets off again the next morning, and you feel the familiar rhythm of travel return to your body. The constant movement, the sway of the camels beneath you, and the endless horizon, it all becomes second nature. The town recedes into the distance, its noise and bustle replaced by the quiet hum of the open road. The wind kicks up, swirling the dust around you as you move deeper into the mountains, a range that looms larger and more imposing with every passing mile. You wonder what lies beyond these rocky peaks. What places, cultures, and goods will you encounter next on this great journey? As you navigate the increasingly narrow passes between the jagged cliffs, you notice a shift in the landscape once more. The air is cooler here, and the mountainsides are covered with sparse vegetation. The road winds its way through steep valleys, and for the first time in a long while, you feel the weight of isolation. It's as though you're entering a new, unknown world. But despite the isolation, there's a strange peace in this remote part of the world. The hustle of the markets and the bustle of travelers seems distant, now replaced by the quiet solitude of the mountains. The guides lead the caravan with confidence, their steps sure as they pick their way along the treacherous path. You've learned to trust their judgment over time, the way they instinctively know where to go, even when the path is not immediately clear. They are not just navigators, they are the guardians of the caravan, protectors of the goods, the people, and the traditions that bind them all together. The mountains may be daunting, but with the guides at the helm, you know the caravan will emerge on the other side unscathed. You stop to rest for a moment, taking in the scenery. The cliffs rise above you like ancient sentinels, their surfaces etched with time, each crack and fissure telling the story of centuries. You wonder how many travelers have passed this way before how many stories have unfolded along this very path. It's a humbling thought this road has existed for centuries, long before your caravan, long before you. The Silk Road is not just a route. It's a living history, a thread woven through time that links the past, present, and future in a tapestry of human experience. The caravan moves on, and soon you find yourself entering a narrow gorge. The towering walls of stone on either side seem to close in around you, and the air feels thick with anticipation. You can hear the distant sound of rushing water, and it's clear that a river lies just beyond the gorge. You wonder how the river will factor into the journey ahead. Will it be an obstacle to overcome, or will it provide a much-needed source of refreshment for the caravan? You can't help but feel a bit anxious as the caravan makes its way through the gorge, the sound of the water growing louder with each step. As you continue forward, you notice the shift in the traveler's mood. There's a quiet tension in the air, a sense that something might be waiting for them on the other side of the gorge. It's a tension you've learned to recognize on the road, an instinctive awareness that something is just out of sight beyond the curve of the road or the next rise. The guides move with purpose, their eyes scanning the landscape ahead. Even the camels seem to sense the change, their movements more cautious, their steps slower. Finally, you emerge from the gorge and are greeted by a stunning sight: the river. It's a wide, fast-moving body of water, its surface shimmering in the sunlight. The caravan halts as the guides begin to assess the best way to cross. You stand at the edge of the river, taking in the scene before you. The river represents both a challenge and an opportunity. It will slow the caravan down, but it will also provide the sustenance necessary for the journey ahead. You wonder how the traders will handle the crossing. Will they build makeshift rafts, or will they wait for the water to subside before continuing? While the caravan waits, you take a moment to explore the area. The riverbank is lush with vegetation, a stark contrast to the barren mountains you've just traversed. There are wildflowers growing along the edge of the water, their vibrant colors a welcome burst of life in the otherwise muted landscape. You spot a few small birds flitting from tree to tree, their calls filling the air. The river, despite its dangers, seems to bring life to this otherwise harsh land. It's a reminder of how interconnected everything on the Silk Road is, the way water trade and nature itself sustain the travelers along their journey. The guides have made their decision, and soon the caravan begins to cross. The water is fast, and the camels seem unsure at first, their large bodies moving hesitantly through the current. But the guides are patient, guiding the animals step by step, ensuring the caravan's safe passage. The sound of the water rushing against the rocks is deafening as you wade through the river, the coolness of the water offering a temporary relief from the heat. It's a moment of shared struggle, a reminder that the road ahead is never easy. But you also know that once you make it to the other side, there will be new challenges to face, new lands to explore, and new stories to be written. As the caravan reaches the far bank of the river, there's a sense of relief among the travelers. The journey has been difficult, but everyone has made it through together. The Silk Road, with all its challenges and obstacles, continues to move forward, one step at a time. And though you are far from the bustling markets of the East, you know that the road will soon bring you back to those places where goods, cultures, and ideas will continue to flow, just as they have for centuries. The caravan has crossed the river, and with each step, you leave behind the rugged isolation of the mountain range. The land ahead is different, a flat, arid stretch of terrain stretching endlessly beneath the scorching sun. The vibrant greenery of the riverbank fades into dusty, pale earth. The roads are smoother here, but there's something unnerving about the emptiness of the land. It's as if you've entered a vast, quiet desert. The only sounds now are the soft shuffle of camel hooves and the occasional distant call of a bird. You continue eastward, and it becomes clear that the landscape is changing again. The mountains you've just ascended fade behind you, and the open plains stretch before you. It's a stark, flat world, the kind that makes you feel small, as if the earth is holding its breath. You look around, wondering if the caravans that came before you encountered the same vastness, the same silence. There's something ancient about this place, a sense that it has remained unchanged for centuries, untouched by the bustle of human activity. Yet you know better. This land has been traversed for millennia by traders, merchants, and travelers just like you. As you walk beside the caravan, you spot a figure in the distance, a lone traveler. It's unusual to see someone so isolated in such a remote region. They're riding a camel, their silhouette small against the endless horizon. There's a pause in your step. You're not sure whether to approach. The roads of the Silk Route can be treacherous, and encounters with strangers are not always as friendly as they seem. But the traveler seems harmless enough, a quiet figure riding along as if they too are a part of this ancient road. The guide notices your glance and shakes his head slightly, a silent signal that it's best to keep moving. You fall back into the rhythm of the journey, but your mind lingers on that figure. Who are they? Where are they headed? The Silk Road is full of strangers, each with their own story, but none are quite as anonymous as the solitary traveler you glimpsed. You wonder if you'll ever cross paths with them again, or if this brief moment will be the last. The plains give way to more rugged terrain as the day wears on. The caravan slows its pace, and you realize that your journey is approaching a crucial stage. You've crossed rivers, scaled mountains, and weathered dust storms, but now the true test lies ahead. You're nearing one of the busiest trade hubs on the entire route, a place where merchants gather from all corners of the known world. You've heard the rumors. The markets here are like nothing you've ever seen, a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and smells. It's a city of opportunity, but also one fraught with danger. Some have disappeared in these crowded streets, never to be heard from again. You wonder if you're prepared for what awaits in the city. The guides have been whispering to each other in low voices, exchanging wary looks. They don't speak openly about the dangers of the city, but you can tell they're uneasy. You overhear one of them mention the word bandits. It's a chilling reminder that not all those who travel the Silk Road are friendly. Some seek to exploit the travelers, taking advantage of their isolation and the riches they carry with them. You've heard the tales of traders losing everything in the blink of an eye, their goods, their camels, and even their lives taken by ruthless thieves. Despite the unease, there's excitement in the air. This is what you've been traveling toward, a chance to see the grandeur of the Silk Road's beating heart, to witness the exchange of ideas, culture, and commerce that has made this route famous across the world. As the city approaches, the first hints of its grandeur begin to reveal themselves. The structures on the horizon, once indistinct, begin to take shape, tall ancient walls adorned with intricate carvings. The air smells faintly of incense, a sign that the city is near. Your anticipation builds as you draw closer. The caravan halts just outside the city walls, and you can sense the shift in mood. The travelers seem to move with more purpose, now their eyes scanning the surroundings, alert to the dangers that lie within the city's confines. The guides exchange a few more words, then turn to face the caravan. It's time to enter. As you pass through the city gates, the noise is immediate. The sound of hammers on metal, the clatter of hooves, the murmur of 1,000 voices. It's overwhelming at first. The streets are narrow, packed with people from every corner of the known world. Merchants shout their wares, their voices mingling with the sound of chimes and the hum of foreign languages. There are scents everywhere, spices, oils, perfumes, and something unidentifiably sweet in the air. It's a dizzying sensory experience, one that leaves you both exhilarated and exhausted. The city is a patchwork of cultures, and it's clear that it thrives on the exchange of goods and ideas. You see traders from Persia, India, and even further, each carrying unique items from their homelands. But there's something else too, a feeling of constant motion, a sense that this place is a living, breathing entity. Every corner reveals something new, something strange, and you can't help but feel a sense of wonder at it all. It's a microcosm of the world, and you're a part of it now. The city's heart beats loudly as you move deeper into its labyrinthine streets. The colors are overwhelming, each market stall bursting with vibrant fabrics, shiny trinkets, and exotic goods from every corner of the known world. You pass silks from China, delicate pottery from Persia, and spices that you can barely name their scents, competing with the heavy air of the crowded streets. The language is a mix of tongues, but the one thing that unites them all is the constant hum of commerce. The merchant stalls are dense with goods, but more intriguing is the movement of people. Travelers from distant lands wander alongside locals, some haggling for goods, while others simply observe as if taking in the spectacle of the Silk Road's ultimate meeting point. There's a sense of connection here, but also a quiet tension. Not every traveler or merchant has good intentions. You've heard stories of strangers disappearing in the crowds of precious goods, slipping through the cracks, never to be seen again. But the energy of the place is undeniable. Everywhere you turn, there's someone or something new to see. In the distance, you spot a group of traders negotiating a large shipment of jade. Nearby, a merchant is offering a piece of finely carved ivory, and you can't help but pause for a moment to appreciate the artistry. The level of craftsmanship here is unlike anything you've encountered before. The traders are more than just sellers. They are keepers of knowledge, sharing stories and wisdom through the wares they bring. It's a different kind of education, one that spans beyond the written word. You find yourself wandering through the markets, letting the sights and sounds wash over you. It's like stepping into another world, one that feels both ancient and new, timeless and fleeting. For a moment, you forget about the long journey that brought you here. You forget about the challenges you've faced and the uncertainties ahead. This is the present. This is the world at its most vibrant and alive, and you are right in the middle of it. As you continue through the city, you can't help but notice the contrasts. The grand architecture stands side by side with the more humble stalls. Wealth and poverty mingle as traders from different backgrounds come together to make their fortunes. Yet even in this disparity, there's a sense of harmony. People seem to understand that they are all part of something larger, something greater than themselves. The Silk Road is more than a trade route. It's a thread that connects cultures, creating a web of interdependence. Historians often debate whether the true value of the Silk Road lies in the goods traded or the cultural exchanges that took place. Was it the silk itself, the spices, or the precious metals that shaped the world, or was it the ideas that flowed along these same routes? The answer, of course, is both. The Silk Road was a conduit for both material wealth and intellectual exchange. It was a place where ideas about science, medicine, philosophy, and art were shared as freely as spices and textiles. It's easy to forget that many of the ideas that shaped the course of history passed through this very city, carried by traders, scholars, and explorers. As the sun begins to set, the marketplace takes on a different character. The heat of the day dissipates, and the cool evening breeze carries a new set of sounds: music, laughter, the clinking of coins. The night market begins to take shape with lanterns lighting the way through the narrow streets. The vendors switch from selling goods to offering food and drink, and the air fills with the smell of roasting meats, sweet pastries, and exotic dishes from distant lands. You find yourself drawn to a stall selling dried fruit and nuts. The merchant is an older man, his face weathered from years of travel. He smiles at you, his teeth crooked but warm, and gestures for you to try a handful of dates. The taste is sweet and rich, unlike anything you've had before. As you nibble on the fruit, the merchant tells you stories of his travels, of the places he's been, and the people he's met. His words are slow and deliberate, but there's a twinkle in his eye, as if every story is a treasure to be shared. You feel a sense of belonging in this moment, as if the journey that has brought you here is part of something much larger than yourself. It's not just about the goods or the wealth. It's about the stories, the experiences, the connections made along the way. The Silk Road is not just a physical route. It's a shared experience, a thread that ties together the disparate cultures of the world. As you stand there listening to the merchant's stories and watching the people around you, you realize that the journey is never truly over. Each stop along the Silk Road is just another chapter, another story in the grand narrative of human history. The world is constantly changing, but some things like the connections we make, the stories we share, and the goods we exchange remain timeless. As the night deepens, you begin to make your way toward the resting place for the caravan. The city has slowed down, but the hum of activity still lingers in the air. You feel the weight of the journey ahead, but you also feel something else, an understanding of the Silk Road's significance that goes beyond the physical goods that cross it. It's about the people, the cultures, the exchanges that happen every day. And in that moment, you realize that this journey, this road that has connected so many, is still alive.